Good afternoon. My name's Roger Lewis of Real Estate Land and Developments Limited. I am a property developer in London, and I've been following closely the Westferry printing works. Great exaggeration, I call it. I have up on my screen the cogent bits of the parliamentary debate, which if we listen to the clips that I've selected from the whole debate, which will be in the description linked in full, but these are the parts of the debate which I'd like to play for you and make my comment at the end of each one. So clip number one is an intervention to Stephen Rees's opening comments.
One day before he overruled them so he could do favours for a friend. The Secretary of State took his decision to approve the Westferry scheme on the 14th of January. That was one day before a new community infrastructure levy came into force. The timing of the Secretary of State's decision saved Mr Desmond up to £50 million.
Grateful to giving way. I think he may be unintentionally misleading the House on that point. This did not save the developer up to £50 million, and if he reads the inspector's report on this, he quite clearly says Schedule 15, the viability assessment, can be rerun in the event the appeal scheme becomes liable for community infrastructure levy. The adjustment is likely to reduce the amount of affordable housing. What the Secretary of State did is made sure the right proportion of affordable housing was delivered on that scheme. What he is saying, quite wrongly, is that was not the reason. If he repeats that, or anybody else does in this debate, they will therefore be intentionally misleading this House.
Key point here.
I'm going to come on to the issue of the proportion of...
The Section 106 agreement is also part of it. The debate develops further, and the same gentleman that just made that intervention makes the same point again. But I'm going to break this down shortly, but let's go to the next thing, which is an intervention from...
Yep.
I'm very, very grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. Irrespective of the rights and wrongs of the Secretary of State's behaviour, viability assessments are used, aren't they, by developers around the country to frustrate the affordable housing targets of local councils and planning authorities. South Lakeland, Lake District, Yorkshire Dales National Parks do their best to provide affordable housing in a place where average house prices can be well in excess of £250,000, and these viability assessments are often used to frustrate that process. Wouldn't it have been better if the Secretary of State were to stand up in the interest of affordable housing and not in the interest of the developer?
Why he needed to take the decision in a way that helped Mr Desmond cut his tax bill, what advice he received about the viability of the scheme with a higher level of affordable housing. It's all there. If he's got nothing to hide, he's got nothing to fear. He can just publish it, and I urge him to do that.
Grateful. I think unintentionally he's risking the reputation of this House. Does he not accept the position, as I stated it earlier? It is not a question of saving the developer up to £50 million. As the inspector admitted himself, it is simply that money would have, a commensurate amount of money would have been reduced from the allocation of affordable housing. That's what would have happened. It was not going into the back pocket of the developer. He must accept that, or he risks the reputation of this House.
I think you're giving me the opportunity to repeat the same point yet again. Let's see the documentation from the department. Let's see the advice that was given to the Secretary of State openly, transparently, for everybody to see. Then we will know exactly whether or not what happened was in breach of the code, of the Ministerial Code of Conduct and the Planning Code, or not.
I think this matter matters because I certainly don't want to be the subject of the innuendo and false accusations that the opposition are choosing to peddle. I'll give way to the Chair of the Select Committee.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way, and I thank him for committing to publish that document, send it to the Select Committee. I'd just say I think it might have been helpful if we'd had it before the debate today. The committee will obviously want to look at it and may then want to enter into further communication or indeed even talk to the Secretary of State about it. Could I ask him one thing? Will the documentation that he sends to the Select Committee include everything that he sent to the Cabinet Secretary following his investigations into this matter?
It will include most of that information, but subject only to the benchmark of the Freedom of Information Act, which I've just described. And I think that's the right approach, and it's on the advice of my department that I do that. And he, I think, would agree with me that if this debate truly is, and I suspect it isn't, because I suspect this debate is mainly motivated by party political considerations, but for the chair of the Select Committee, for whom I have the greatest respect, if one is concerned about the probity of the planning system, then it's absolutely right that we release documentation in accordance with the rules, bearing in mind this is a live planning matter. Let me make... I'll come back to the Honourable, but let me make some progress. For the benefit of the House, I want to take this opportunity to outline the facts of the case. As honourable members will be aware, the Secretary of State's role in deciding called-in planning applications and recovered appeals is very long established. The vast majority of planning decisions are rightly determined at a local level by local planning authorities. However, Parliament has created provision where a small proportion of cases are determined by ministers. The cases that fall to ministers are by their nature highly contentious, frequently very complex, and sometimes very subjective. There's no escaping that reality. It's not unusual for ministers to come to a different conclusion to that of a local authority. Neither is it unusual, as has been said, for ministers to disagree with the recommendations of planning inspectors. And I say that with no disrespect to the brilliant men and women who work in the planning inspectorate. My predecessors have done so on multiple occasions on both sides of the House. In a moment, I just want to make a bit more progress, if I may, because it's important to set out the facts. In the last 3 years, 14 substantive decisions have been made by ministers in disagreement with the recommendations of the inspector. These applications can't be easily compared, and each case must be determined on its own merits. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what I've done in all cases since becoming Secretary of State, as the documents that I intend to publish, I hope, will demonstrate. If I may, I'll give a moment, if I may, and answer his question at that point. I'll just make some more progress, and I will come back to the Honourable Lady. Madam Deputy Speaker, in July 2018, Westferry Developments submitted a planning application for a large development comprising 1,500 homes, including affordable homes, shops and office space. The case was with Tower Hamlets Council for 8 months. And over this period, despite having 5 determination meetings arranged, they failed to make a decision. It is disappointing that the Council failed to meet its statutory requirements, but it isn't surprising. In the last 5 years, there have been 30 planning applications which have been decided at appeal because of non-determination by this Council. The Council had considerable time to process the application. Indeed, a meeting of the Strategic Development Committee was cancelled in January 2019 due to lack of business. Lack of business in a housing crisis with applications like this one before the Council. Is this fair? Does the Labour Party believe this is fair? In our system of law, justice delayed is justice denied. And that is what Tower Hamlets Council were trying to do here. I will in a moment. This, I remind the House, is the Council that has the highest housing deficit in England according to the Housing Delivery Test. Given Tower Hamlets' failure to determine the case within the prescribed period on the 26th of March, the developer exercised their right to appeal to the Planning Inspectorate. And after advice, my predecessor, not me, as has been said on many occasions by many individuals, including the honourable gentleman opposite, my predecessor took the decision to recover the appeal. All the parties were notified about this in a letter dated the 10th of April 2019. So, before I give way to honourable members, let's be clear. I didn't call in this application. I wasn't the Secretary of State. The application wasn't called in. It came to the department because of the failure of Tower Hamlets Council. Here we have a council described by one of my predecessors as a rotten borough, failing time and again to make decisions and to get houses built, and a mayor of London with a dire record on housing, leaving us to step in and take the tough decisions that they refuse to make.
But citing the actions of the Conservative Party and this decision, which he described as, quote, a decision was so shocking I knew immediately that I had to resign. Isn't that the fact?
Yeah. Well, it's not a deflection to talk about Tower Hamlets Council, because in all likelihood, this decision would never have been made by the Secretary of State if Tower Hamlets Council had met its statutory obligations and taken the decision. And with respect to the councillor who he raises, who I don't know, but I have no issue with, he was standing up for the concerns of his local residents. And I return to the point that I made earlier, that in my job, it is essential to make... Order. There's nothing rotten in my department. I've got some of the best officials in Whitehall, of whom I'm extremely proud to work. And the Honourable Lady can't have it both ways. If she disagrees with my decision, she should go back to Tower Hamlets Council and tell them to start making decisions themselves, not frustrating planning applications, so that they come to me and my predecessors and successors have to make the tough decisions. And I will give way to the Honourable Lady, then I must make progress.
Just for giving way, given that the Prime Minister pushed through the original scheme for the same developer when he was Mayor of London, does he feel that the documents or any involvement of number 10 or any conversation with the Secretary of State's decision to grant approval should also be published?
Well, I'm publishing, as I've just said, in an almost unprecedented way, a very comprehensive set of documents, which I think members on both sides of the House will be more than satisfied with. I would just politely note to the Honourable Lady that her name did come up in the correspondence and advice that I received from officials, as it does when I take these decisions, because I ask my officials, did the local Member of Parliament make any representations with respect to this application? Because I want to take into account the views of members on all sides of this House. As she'll see in the documents, they advised me that the Member of Parliament made no representations. The Member of Parliament, I think in their words, but I stand to be corrected, took no interest in this application, and neither did her predecessor. So she may be outraged today, but I would suggest that members on all sides of this House who care about contentious planning applications should make some representations to the Secretary of State, because I'm not a mind reader. Let me just make some progress, if I may. Of course not. Of course not. It's extremely important that we maintain the probity of the planning system, and that's what I believe I've done in this case. And she can be a judge of that if she wishes when she sees the documents. I will make some more progress. I'm conscious that a lot of time is passing. In the same month, the planning inspector submitted his report to me recommending that the appeal be dismissed. As is usual, my officials reviewed the inspector's report and prepared advice for me to consider. I reviewed this, along with advice on 6 other urgent planning cases, upon my return to the department in December following the general election. Not at this time, I need to make some progress. Upon reviewing the advice on Westferry, including the inspector's recommendation, I requested further advice on key questions. For example, asking the department to source images to understand the potential impact of the scheme on historic Greenwich. Having reviewed all the evidence and taken a further in-depth meeting with senior officials to discuss the case in the first week in January, I determined to allow the appeal and grant planning permission. As I've set out in the letter to the Select Committee Chair, in coming to the decision, I considered the significant contribution of housing in a part of the country which is particularly unaffordable, including almost 300 affordable homes, as well as a Chinese wall, whereby another minister within the department who has no interest in that application takes the ultimate decision. And that's exactly what we did in that case. So I would strongly urge members on all sides of the House and the media who have reported on that issue to tread carefully, because we shouldn't bring in something as important as our National Holocaust Memorial to this party political discussion. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to him and his being very decent with his time. He's made the case for feeling the need to intervene in this case, to deliver housing. And I wonder if he understands my frustration and the frustration of many other members here present. My part of the world, we have London house prices without anything like London wages. And yet we regularly look to his department to intervene, to help deliver affordable houses, and yet his department allows developers to get away with viability assessments that gets rid of those affordable housing. I wish he was tough in those cases too, when it came to the Lake District and our other parts of the country around here too.
I don't know if the honourable gentleman is asked to call in applications. He certainly hasn't come to see me on any applications in my tenure in the last 12 months, but I'd happily meet him in the appropriate way if he wishes to do so. My record as Secretary of State, I think, is clear for all to see in the range of applications that I have considered, the difficult decisions I've consistently made, and that's impacting members on all sides of this House and their constituencies. If one does this job properly, you get homes built. You don't necessarily make friends, and I don't make apologies for that. Each decision must be made on its merits, but if we want to tackle the housing crisis, we need to build homes. Let me just make some progress, because this debate has many other speakers who wish to participate. Any accusation that my view on a highly complex and publicised development could have been swayed by an encounter with a developer is not just simply wrong, but actually outrageous. Who the applicant was is immaterial to my decision, as it always is and always should be. Always should be. I knew nothing of the donation that was made, and would never have allowed it to influence my decision, even if I had known about the donation. However, I'm not blind to the fact that things could and should have been done differently. On reflection, I should have handled the communication differently. But it is... Let me make this point, please. But it is unfortunate that some have sought partisan advantage in this, rather than having a serious discussion about Britain's housing shortage. I stand by the decision that I made. I believe passionately that Britain needs to build houses. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is what we are doing. Indeed, this government's track record on how...
That's the essence of the debate. The two interventions at the beginning to the Simon Reeves. Oh, how do you describe such a tissue of exaggeration? The two interventions made quite clear he was misleading the House of Commons on 2 points. Number one, no one saved £40 million, let alone £106 million, which Reeves, triumphantly reported, and Tower Hamlets even say we saved £106 million. Absolute poppycock. And then the important point that Tim Farron makes is about the viability assessments, which I go into in the document I'm about to talk about, and how viability assessments work, and that it's something also I've discussed in other videos you'll find on my channel and Financial Eyes channel. So finally, what I want to do is just introduce this speech, which is a real blockbuster, and one which something we should all take note of. Now, this is an MP for West Bromwich West, Conservative Sean Bailey, okay? And he makes this speech, which is a proper banging heads together speech. So actually I'm not going to play it on here, I'm going to play it on full screen off the Parliamentary website, because this deserves proper attention.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'll keep my comments short, but I just want to say this is a personal one from me.
As well, please, Mr Bailey, to be seated by 342.
I'll keep my comments short, Mr Deputy Speaker, just to reiterate that point. But I've got no choice, exactly. This is a personal one for me, because, as I've said before, I know what it's like to be in social housing. I needed that. I know what it's like to fear for your life when you think you're going to die because your dad's going to come and kill you. And I know what it's like to languish on their housing list for 12 months, having to live off sofas, sofa surf at 5 years old, watch your mother crying her heart out because she can't get home because there's not enough of them. And they have the gall to come in here now and lecture and pander about housing lists. How dare they, Mr Deputy Speaker? The reality is we could have talked so much today about how we revolutionise our planning system. We could have talked so much about how we ensure that kids like that don't have to fear for the future. We could have talked about how we truly level up. But instead, all that seems to have happened is a smear on my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, and it is an absolute disgrace. No, I won't give way. I'm going to show the same courtesy that honourable members opposite showed the honourable members on this side of the House. The reality is, Mr Deputy Speaker, that we can go back through the figures that my honourable friends on this side of the House have gone through today. We can go back through the arguments that have been repeated time and time again. No, Tower Hamlets didn't do their job. It seems to be a habit with Labour councillors that they don't do their job for some reason. If you see my case bag, you'd probably see why. But the reality is that we need to be making sure that we have a planning process that works, that we build affordable homes, that we build homes that people can aspire to, that they can buy, that we can ensure that kids in places like mine in Tipton, who are fearing for their lives, who haven't got a stable home, can have that, and that we invest in social housing, social rent housing, which I'm afraid the Mayor of London in particular has an abysmal record. £4.82 billion he was given by this government. He failed to build social housing in 9 London boroughs, Mr Deputy Speaker. The figures and the facts speak for themselves. The reality is, Mr Deputy Speaker, is simply this. I want to ensure that we have a planning system that truly works, that we can level up, that I can turn around to kids in my constituency, in Wednesbury, Albury and Tipton, that have gone through the same thing to me, same circumstances as me, that with the right housing, with the right home and with a roof over their head, just like me, they can be the council house lad that got to Westminster. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Wind-ups, Mike Amesbury.
There you
go. Mark that well. Sean Bailey hitting the nail squarely on the head there. Affordable housing, political football, no. So that's the debate in Parliament, and the two interventions at the beginning, as I've already said, hit the nail on the head. Sean Bailey hits the nail on the head, and Robert Jenrick also hits the nail on the head. It was woeful. Tim Farron had something of the flavour of the complexities, and that viability studies do have problems, but again he makes this mistake that community infrastructure levy is a tax. It's a levy for infrastructure, and the money collected is to be spent on infrastructure. The affordable housing aspects of Section 106 agreements and how much levy can be ameliorated by the amount of forward it is part of a complex equation which is gone into in the inspector's report. And if these people had taken the trouble to inform themselves of what the system is, they could quite rightly draw the conclusion that the system is indeed a mess, a bureaucratic mess, but what it's actually doing is promoting crony capitalism of the sort I'm now going to show you. So this is a document which is online, and I titled it The Great Westferry Printworks Exaggeration, and this is a quote from the Planning Officers Society. Past problems of valuation complexity could well be resolved with big data and artificial intelligence. Zoopla probably sets local property prices more effectively and more accurately than the estate agency industry does. That's a complete stupid statement. Number one, garbage in, garbage out. And number two, a well-informed estate agent will know the price of tomatoes, as it were, you know, the value of a pound note. Whereas Zoopla is basically a cipher, a repeater, a garbage in, garbage out regurgitator, and garbage out regurgitation is exactly what we saw from Stephen Reeves and all of the knockers and whingers who were criticising what had been a very bold decision by Robert Jenrick. And I celebrate the fact that we've got someone in that position with a pair of balls that will actually stand up and make a decision as the elected officer in the highest elected office in the land that deals with these sorts of things. It was an opinion, it was a matter of fact. In a jury trial, the judge decides on law and the jury decides on facts, matter of facts, and which often are coloured by opinion, and opinion you draw on different accounts of the same events. And there's very little difference in planning and the calls that Mr. Jenrick made here with respect to the affordable level housing, the effect on views, the tallness of the buildings, the effect of the wind on the sailing centre, and a host of other technical planning and building matters. So I'm interested in this. Just to let you know, I'm an active property developer. I will be negotiating on large sites with the Borough of Tower Hamlets, with Southwark, with Newham, with other local authorities all over the country, and this sort of hold up in the planning system just isn't on, and Tower Hamlets really do have a case to answer here that they've been incompetent on this. They've been falling down on the job, and that came out in the debate in Parliament, but you wouldn't know it to look at this, for instance. Now, this is the report on ITV News, which says it's summarising these things, and this is Keir Starmer, who also says, oh, there's still a case to answer. There is no case to answer. There is no there. This is Inside Building, another magazine, and again, it's gone through the documentation. I did the same exercise myself, and effectively they then make a commentary on what these things say, pointing to a wholly spurious conclusion. Robert Jenrick did his job. That is the beginning and end of this, and what he actually his decision did was actually get more affordable homes closer to a start on site, and this current hiatus because of this political football and party politics, which Robert Jenrick said he suspected it had more to do with party politics than the actual facts. I think he's correct about that, what we need to do is actually just consider, just briefly, what some of those facts are. This document's available online. It will be in the description. Anyway, all of the hand-wringing and nudging and winking should be familiar to people who are watching this, hoping to find some great treatise on Tory sleaze. This is not sleaze. This is not sleaze. This is someone doing a very good job against the backdrop of a broken planning system, and actually taking hold of something and saying, right, I'm going to make a bold decision. Now, what these other people are doing is whataboutery, you know, and as Robert Jenrick said, the irony of this is Tower Hamlets could have decided this themselves, but they didn't, and there's no getting away from that. So then there's these figures, 40 million, 106 million, 30 million. That is complete nonsense, and then this document goes in and talks about community infrastructure levy. It talks about the Section 106 agreement. Not only does it talk about them, it goes in a little bit of commentary about what they are. explains the National Planning Policy Framework, which is the overarching framework. Then it goes down into the GLA framework, and then into the London Borough Tower Hamlets Community Infrastructure Levy framework and Local Plan framework. And then it tracks from the consented scheme and how they approached the viability study. This was from a report by DS2, and there's a link to this report. This is a plan of what was on the table as late as February 2019. Tower Hamlets could have agreed to this, and this would be on site being built at the moment, and this amounts to 35% affordable housing by habitable rooms. It's 402 units. Robert Jenrick refers in his final clip that I just showed you to there being 302 affordable units, and the exaggerators are saying it's 200 affordable homes, and that's 21%. That must be 21% by habitable rooms. This report, if you care to read it, will explain the differences, etc. This then is the viability study itself, which has this line down here, which is £11 million of CIL and 106 contributions. Those contributions are actually set out in this deed from 2016, which is 152 pages long, and on page 76 you will find the clawback provisions, which Robert Jenrick refers to in his decision. Then going forward again now, this is the viability breakdown to the penny, a link to where you'll find that, and it's by planning consultants called Gerald Eve, who are basically the top firm of chartered surveyors in the United Kingdom, in my opinion. Then this is the relevant extracts from the decision that Robert Jenrick made, which is reasoned, and he sets out why he has disagreed with the planning inspector's opinions and where he has. Then this document then goes on to another case in Ealing, which was waved through during the lockdown or whatever. It was made in July 2019. It has prior planning issues. It's for 930 homes. It's on existing affordable homes, land owned by a housing association who are supposedly not for profit. It's a joint venture between them and a for-profit design and build contractor called Mount Anvil. Mount Anvil, as well as this open checkbook planning consent, were also favoured with a £50 million loan from Sadiq Khan. I mean, what's going on there? Where's the cries of outrage? 300 letters of objection, protests outside the town hall, compared to 30 letters of objection on the Westferry Printworks. All the links are here. You can go and look at that yourself, make your own conclusions. The actual planning decision does not give a proper effect to the Section 106 contributions set out in the officer's report. Following on as well from that, it's also important to note that what they do in the decision is talk about clawback provisions. Therefore, the actual amount of outturn CIL contributions with one of these clawback provisions can't really be decided until the scheme is actually completed, and on larger schemes that can be phased. And then I go on at the end of this document to show a fully build to rent scheme from Grosvenor Estates at the biscuit factory in Southwark. I go on in this document to talk about the community infrastructure levy, what collections Tower Hamlets have made since 2015, what they've spent. They've collected nearly £47 million and spent £124,000. I mean, that goes to the point that was actually being made here by Sean Bailey about Sadiq Khan has failed to build affordable housing in 9 London boroughs, in spite of the fact that I think that central government has actually granted £4.5 million or whatever. Then as we just flipping through this quickly again, that's all about community infrastructure levy. This is the Planning Officer Society quote again, and you'll see that the way they approach community infrastructure levy is almost as a wealth tax. They see it as getting money off greedy developers. financial viability is to do with how much risk there is in a development, and then what return is required on capital to basically make it worth the while of a property developer to take that risk. Now, Richard Desmond is not a crony capitalist. I'm not a crony capitalist. I would say that Mount Anvil and Catalyst Housing Association are crony capitalists. They're getting the bailouts, they're getting the loans from, you know, etc., and being waived through a planning process, etc. What's happened here is that it's been delayed, and the noses have been turned up at very, very good proposals on what is an excellent, it's an excellently conceived major redevelopment on a key site. So this talks about reporting CIL and what CIL's for. There are various links, you know, basically backing up all the relative the relevant proposals, and this is a viability comparison tool being developed by Tower Hamlets and by Southwark, which throws out this ridiculous conclusion regarding the Grosvenor Estates biscuit factory thing. It is alpha, so they might improve it, but what they actually say is that the scheme should be actually liable to a huge CEL contribution, and in the final outturn what the contribution actually was for this very large scheme, similar size scheme, but it's subject to phasing and a clawback arrangement, but it's coming to £23 million in total, nothing like £40 million. This is in Southwark. You have a similar charging rate, and this is for all, and it's 32% affordable housing. It's a slightly different way of doing things, but it's subject to clawback, and that may or may not be. If you read the deed, you'll see that that is not a settled thing at the beginning. It's not like a tax bill, it's a levy, but also it's variable, and it's based upon the viability and how much can actually be taken out of the overall pot of money, and affordable housing goes in that pot too, which is the precise point that was made in the very first intervention to the Labour housing guy and Reeves, and he continued to make the same misrepresentation all the way through the debate, as did others. So that's it from me on this. Any questions, put them in the comments. Anyone who wishes to can ring me up and talk to me. I'm looking for sites in and around London, across the UK. We're an affordable housing developer, and we have substantial funds to invest, and all we want to do is build affordable housing for private sale in the open market. We're free market capitalists, and we don't do crony capitalism.